Coming up on Lawmakers. A bill aimed at making schools safer clears a Senate committee. Citizens speak out on a bill regulating where power lines can be placed. And Senate Appropriations Chairman George Hooks has the latest on paying for the Walker County cleanup. Those stories are next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Wednesday, February 27th. Here are your hosts, Gerald Bryant and Susan Hoffman.
Good evening, everybody. Also on tonight's broadcast, the latest on efforts to assist the disabled in Georgia.
And an update on legislation that would require parents to approve their kids' school activities. But our lead story tonight, the school loitering bill.
The 10-year-old victim of last week's school hammer attack is making a miraculous recovery at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Today, the Senate Education Committee approved a measure that they hope will prevent future school attacks. And Wandy Lawson is joining us live from the Capitol. And Wandy, how does this bill change school security?
Well, Susan, currently public school policy requires visitors to check in when they visit a campus, but some people, like the alleged Gwinnett Schools attacker, just circumvent this rule. So trespassing laws require school officials to ask the individual to leave before he can be charged with a crime. HB 161 seeks to close that loophole. It may be the image of alleged school attacker Chad Brandt Hageman that has pushed school safety to the front of most people's minds, but Representative Gail Buckner has personal reasons for pursuing anti-trespassing legislation.
The legislation grew out of a situation that happened in one of my schools where a man was found wandering the halls. The resource officer arrested the man. When the case got before a judge, that judge had to throw the case out because the man had not been asked to leave the building.
Educators expressed approval for the bill, but concern for a provision allowing parents 3 chances to enter unannounced without facing prosecution. An amendment by Senators Thomas Price and Phil Gingrey removed this provision, and the committee agreed unanimously to recommend HB 161 to the full Senate. Now, the Senate Education Committee also approved a measure today compelling schools to prevent students from participating in extracurricular activities not approved by their parents. But that was barely passed. Heated debate arose about whether this rule would restrict academic freedom and also whether it was needed at all. But in the end, the committee did side with the bill sponsor and the committee chair, Senator Richard Marable. That vote was 5-4. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Wandy Lawson for Lawmakers.
Thanks so much, Wandy.
The Senate today agreed to reorganize the department which provides services to the disabled. House Bill 498 changes the name of the Department of Mental Health, Mental Retardation, and Substance Abuse to the Department of Health and Developmental Disorders. Senator Connie Stokes said the name change also signaled a change in the way services will be provided.
We need better accountability. And I think if I had to just state one important thing, or the most important thing that this bill is going to do, is transfer the accountability from the regional planning boards to the Department of Human Resources through the division, division that will be administering this program.
Several senators expressed concern that the measure might create more bureaucracy and amount to an unfunded mandate. First, Senate Minority Leader Eric Johnson.
The floor substitute that I was going to drop yesterday and agree to hold off on so we can get the process going into a conference committee would have eliminated the regional planning boards. Now, there has to be some sort of planning done, but I'm concerned that leaving the existing regional boards, putting them in a planning capacity, may end up still with the bureaucracy there, or the cost to that bureaucracy there, even if they took away their decision-making process.
I believe, and though I'm going to vote for the bill, I think it's very important to note that this delivery system and this oversight cannot work with the numbers at DHR right now. I think it's very critical to note that DHR is going to have a direct supervisory role over the CSBs as opposed to the regional boards. And if you end up in the future having a DHR budget, and it's a tight budget now, which means we probably don't have the money to increase the numbers at the moment, but if in the future we don't plan for increased numbers that can assure quality with the provision of mental health care, mental retardation, and substance abuse services, you will have the same citizens calling to the government and nothing happening.
The Senate approved the 55-page committee substitute to House Bill 498. That means it goes back to the House. The vote in the Senate was 53-0.
Several citizens' rights groups and some Republican lawmakers believe the power of eminent domain gives utility companies too much power. A pair of bills now making their way through the House will require utilities to get permission from city or county government before condemning a property. Hamilton Northcutt is joining us live with a report on the legislation's process as it goes through the Judiciary Subcommittee. Hamilton.
Currently, power plants, sewer facilities, phone and cable companies, and other utilities can run lines across any property they deem necessary. House Bills 1273 and 1319 would impose tighter restrictions on property use.
Taking somebody's land for public purpose is very extreme, and it has to be done. I am not against power lines. I think, however, when you take the power of the government to take people's land, at a minimum, you should give people a fair public hearing and show that you have considered all the alternatives. The second part of my bill is you have to show that you've considered all the alternatives.
People of the state want input in whether or not we're going to allow private entities, not the government, but private entities, to come in and take their personal and private land.
About a dozen concerned citizens spoke out in support of these bills, saying the legislation would help protect their property values and their property rights.
We are being asked to give up property, incur property value losses, and negative changes in our quality of life in exchange for electricity that is primarily earmarked for other communities.
The Constitution of Georgia says that our property is protected by due process, but we have no due process. We have nowhere to air our grievance. We have no way to ask, is this line needed?
Representatives of several utilities spoke in opposition, saying these bills would slow economic growth and improvements to infrastructure.
Our goal, of course, is to maintain a strong electricity network to ensure that Georgia does not experience major interruptions in electricity. The critical shortages and high cost of electricity that has been mentioned many times in California and their situation, we want to be sure we don't let that happen in the state of Georgia. We need to make sure that our infrastructure keeps pace with the economic growth that we have.
The Commercial Law Subcommittee approved both bills, but some members said they might not support this legislation when it comes to a full committee vote. Reporting live from the House, I'm Hamilton Northcutt for Lawmakers.
Thanks, Hamilton.
In other news, the Senate agreed with the House today that those who provide the community service of installing child safety seats should be immune from lawsuits. Senator Richard Marable said some agencies had eliminated the service because they feared the liability.
What this does, it gives immunity to those certified technicians who are dealing with that at no cost. They're not charging for these services that are there. Now, they're not excluded if they're proven liable or willful or wanton neglect in installation. It also excludes anyone who is associated with those companies that may install or be paid professionally to do that. This is a great piece of legislation. If we do not pass this, many of those organizations will not be installing those seats. Several have already stopped doing it because of the liability issue.
The Senate approved House Bill 1066 by a vote of 52-0. It now goes to the governor for his approval.
Also today, the Senate agreed that property seized in criminal investigations should be available for sale and improvement. Senator Horsina Tate explained how this would apply after a drug bust.
This piece of legislation is considered the House Forfeiture Bill, which is designed to increase options for disposal of property taken in high crime areas, such as drug houses, which I know none of you have that in rural counties, or abandoned lots. This would render these particular properties unmarketable. Currently, the law allows for sale of these types of properties. This bill will enhance the ability of the local authorities in getting these properties back in use and revitalizing their surrounding neighborhoods.
The Senate approved House Bill 783. The vote on that was 52-0.
21 Northwest Georgia ministers presided over a prayer service in Noble, Georgia today. 339 bodies have been recovered so far in and around the tri-state crematory. The cleanup operation in Walker County continues to be a concern to state budget makers. Late this afternoon, I talked about that concern with Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Senator George Hooks. You passed the supplemental budget through Senate Appropriations yesterday, the Senate's version of the midterm spending plan. Let's talk for a moment about Walker County. How are you going to be able to determine how much to set aside for those cleanup efforts, and at what point will that happen that you will insert something in the budget, and what has to go?
That's a lot of questions, Gerald. Let me see if I can back up and answer you. Walker County has landed in the state's lap after the supplemental or mid-year adjusted budget passed the House of Representatives over the Senate. The Governor's office correctly has written and communicated with the Senate and asked us to identify certain initial funds within the budget that they could initially begin this process. We've already done that. We placed around $700,000 in cash in the Governor's emergency funds under a category that's specifically categorized for these type of emergencies. That's money that's readily available as soon as, of course, the supplemental budget is passed. That's over and above what the House has done and what the Governor had initially. The Governor, of course, cut his fund initially along with others. At exactly the same time, we passed the supplemental budget because we had a lot of cuts in the supplemental budget, the bond package, what the Governor and the House had added. But at exactly the time in the appropriations room we passed it, we received the very unfortunate news for the taxpayers of Georgia that we had been denied on the federal level of any type federal funding and assistance, which means that Walker County and the officials of Walker County alone, taxpayers there, and the state have to bear the expense. Unfortunately, this is a moving target. We now have well in excess of over 300 human remains or bodies up there. We have over 500 state employees. We have almost 50 federal employees up there that are here at our invitation. So we're paying them, forensics and people like that. So it's going to be an expensive proposition, and right now we're working toward hopefully closure, but we're a little way off.
Let me ask you this. Are there any other federal avenues? I understand it would be possible for Congress on its own to pass some sort of emergency legislation for funding. Is that being pursued with Georgia's congressional delegation?
It certainly is. And I want to take this opportunity to thank both of Georgia's United States Senators, the members of the House of Representatives. They have been right on top of this and working with possibly amending the federal budget for this. The reason Washington has denied this, of course, it's not a natural disaster. It's not a flood, a fire, a windstorm, whatever. And that's what FEMA falls under. So it's unfortunately a crime. It's just a shame. It's a heartbreaking situation. We've got the Attorney General's office and everybody else looking at every legal angle on this. But right now, it's in our state, and we have a responsibility to the citizens of Georgia to step forward and to make whatever cuts are necessary to come up with the budget, come up with the money. Now, with that said, Gerald, this is a perfect example of what it means to live in a state that is as fiscally responsible as we are. Our reserve funds are full, and we, of course, are operating in the black. We could be in our neighboring states that are not in that situation. So we'll make the necessary cuts and cutbacks and come up with the funds. Now, we're watching these funds very closely.
Last question, quick answer, please. When do you expect the supplemental budget to appear before the full Senate?
It'll be on the Senate floor Friday. We'll go to conference after Friday, and hopefully we resolve it sometime next week and continue on the Walker County problem as we work in the big budget for 03.
Senator George Hooks, Chair of Senate Appropriations, thanks for joining us on Lawmakers.
Thank you, Gerald.
In other news, legislators are looking at a bill that would give doctors some flexibility in prescribing medications. The Senate Insurance and Labor Committee delayed voting on legislation today that would make it possible for insurance to cover FDA-approved prescription drugs that are prescribed for reasons other than what the drug was designed for. An example is when a dermatologist would prescribe birth control pills to treat acne. Here's Lawmakers' Julie Turner with the latest.
A representative of Georgia Pharmacy Association was at today's committee meeting to show support for Senate Bill 458.
We support Senator Thomas's initiative to have medications provided to patients for off-label use.
Terry Hodges from the Department of Community Health says that the commissioner of her agency has some concerns about the bill.
The commissioner has indicated that he had a little bit of a concern and would like to talk a little further about how this would affect our prior authorization process as it is now. Currently with a drug, the drugs on prior authorization, there are specific uses for that drug, and if this drug was prescribed for another type of use, this could be a conflict there.
Senator Don Balfour was among committee members that disagreed with the bill's postponement.
Explain to me why we wouldn't want to take the drug that does the same thing as Cipro today and save the state money.
I haven't been told that we would want it. I mean, I think we are interested in doing those types of things.
But we're holding up on a bill that's been sitting around. I know we're not going to make a motion at this point, but I mean, we have a Rules Committee, we have a House Committee. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to try to move this along and see if we can sell it, because it sounds to me like there's a savings involved with this.
The Department of Community Health did not voice opposition in this bill. The commissioner of the agency simply requested that the bill remain in committee longer so they can get more information regarding the language. For Lawmakers, I'm Julie Turner.
The Senate Insurance Committee also approved the Consumers Health Insurance Protection Act today. The bill, one of the governors, requires insurance companies to staff 24-hour hotlines so that patients can get pre-certified for emergency procedures. These pre-certifications would be binding. The bill would also allow a terminally ill patient or a woman beyond the first trimester of pregnancy to remain under their doctor's care for 60 days if that physician's contract is terminated. Again, the bill, Senate Bill 476, passed out of the Senate Insurance Committee. It is moving to Senate Rules Committee to be placed on the Senate calendar for floor debate.
Also today, the Senate approved a resolution keeping the teachers' retirement system separate from the state employees' retirement system. Senator Terrell Starr told his colleagues that the measure had been requested by the state's teachers. The Senate also agreed that retired peace officers should be allowed to return to work while continuing to receive their state pensions. Senator Steve Thompson explained how this would increase the pool of experienced officers.
This would allow 120 police officers to be able to continue to work and still draw their stipend from the Peace Officer Annuity and Benefit Fund of some $700 a month. It's their money. They pay it in. I will tell you, this is an effort to keep qualified police officers. For instance, in Cobb, it would keep 2 bomb technicians. In today's world, it's very important that we keep experience, and that's what the bill does. I do want to disclose to you now that the board, the Peace Officers Association supports it wholeheartedly. The policemen in this state support it. There is a split on the board. They initially supported it 100%. Now they don't, and we just hope we're going to let the House worry about that, and hopefully they can send us a unified message next time.
Senate Bill 100 was approved by a vote of 51-0. It moves to the House. House Bill 1078 also received Senate approval. The measure would compel industrial life insurance companies to notify a second party before canceling policies on senior citizens. Senator Robert Brown explains the bill.
All this bill does is provide that the holder of an industrial life insurance policy would have the option to have a person other than themselves to be notified prior to any cancellation, lapse, or termination. This is an effort to have those individuals who are 65 years or older not have their insurance policies lapse. Right now, I don't think we have any industrial life policies in Georgia, but it is still legal to have these policies, and if such time as the climate would change and if we would have these policies issued in Georgia, we just want to have this safeguard for our elderly citizens.
That measure was approved by a vote of 51-0. It awaits the governor's approval.
Lawmakers try to make good on advertised tax credits. Today, the House passed House Bill 1439. The bill gives tax credits to people who bought no or low-emission vehicles last year. Representative Richard Royal says the tax credits were on the books already, and dealers promoted them heavily. People bought accordingly. However, the tax credit was never intended to cover golf cart-type vehicles, as some thought they would. This bill is designed to accommodate those people. Here's Representative Royal.
A lot of them are nothing but glorified golf carts. In committee last year, when we passed this legislation, that issue always came up. In committee, the Department of Revenue was there, and we always said we would not allow this tax credit for anything that looked like a golf cart or not much more than that. We created the Department of Motor Vehicles, which was not in on those conversations, and they tagged and titled some 72 of these vehicles, which the state became involved in, which made these individuals feel like they were due the tax credit. So that's why we're trying to address the issue.
Many lawmakers, like Representative Lester Jackson, had questions. He wanted to know what would trigger the tax credits.
If a vehicle was purchased in 2001 and wasn't delivered until January of 2002, can you tell me what applies?
It does not qualify. It's triggered on the delivery date, which is the same as the federal government tax credit. It's based on the delivery date. Now, I have had a number of individuals who say, I've placed an order, I paid for them, I have not taken delivery. I have told those individuals if I return next January, I'll introduce legislation to try to cover them. House Bill 1439 is engrossed. It cannot be amended. And, if we do not pass 1439, then nobody gets a tax credit. It's too late to introduce another bill because it's after the 20th day.
This one-time tax credit will cost the state $3.5 million. Representative Royal calls the offer and Governor Barnes' blessing generous. Most in the House agreed to support the measure. HB 1439 passed 162-2. It moves to the Senate, where a similar bill has already been approved.
The Senate today agreed with the Department of Natural Resources that a portion of the money collected for emissions testing should continue to be used for public education. Senator Michael Meyer von Bremen explained that the measure would help the state maintain its federal road grants.
In the metro Atlanta areas, I told you before, they were using part of the fee for the purpose of public information as to the testing centers, and that fee was recently ruled in a court, that state court ruled that they can't do it that way because the law wasn't lined up to read that way. This law now corrects that. It now authorizes them to do what they've been doing since 1996, basically consumer protection. It's good legislation. We need it so that we can continue to receive the federal funding for the DOT.
The Senate approved House Bill 1103 by a vote of 50-0. It goes to the governor. Another natural resources measure approved in the Senate allows DNR and local authorities to approve the placement of sand dredged from harbors by the Army Corps of Engineers. Currently, the sand is dumped on rented land. Senator Renee Kemp said the measure would save taxpayers millions of dollars.
This bill originally was recommended by Colonel Smith, who is the Savannah District Engineer with the Corps of Engineers, and he asked why in the world Georgia hadn't passed a piece of legislation like this long before, because it would save the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars.
The Senate approved the committee substitute to House Bill 1021 by a vote of 50-0, so it goes back to the House. The Senate agreed to a transfer of CSX rail property to a municipality that wants to create a memorial on the grounds. Senator Richard Marable explains.
CSX has some property there, railroad property that was leased by the state of Georgia that's unused. The city of Kingston, Georgia, wishes to build a park and a monument honoring American war veterans on that spot. There is a transaction there on the second page, if you'll look. It's a $10 transaction fee.
Two bills intended to protect the state's seafood industry also passed the Senate today. House Bill 1059 lowers the minimum size for the collection of certain fish. The Senate approved that by a vote of 50-0. It goes to the governor. And a second measure intended to rebuild the blue crab population passed as well. Senator Peg Blitch outlined the bill's provisions.
It essentially does three things. It prohibits the harvest or possession of egg-bearing female blue crabs for a 3-year period. It also gives authority to the DNR to close salt waters to blue crabbing in the event of disasters. Third thing it does, that anyone possessing sponge crabs or undersized crabs would be required to have an invoice documenting the legal origin of the crabs.
House Bill 1057 was approved by a vote of 49-1. It goes to Governor Barnes.
Also today, members of the Family Connection Partnership, whose initiative is achieving a vision of positive outcomes for Georgia's children, were joined by the governor this morning to share some key findings for 2002. David Zelsky has our story.
To be able to have a better life from thence whence you came. That's the message that we should send to the future generations. That's the message that Family Connections is built all around. Thank you, and God bless you.
With initiatives like keeping children healthy and succeeding in school with strong family principles, the Family Connection Partnership has grown to become the largest statewide network of community collaboratives in the nation.
The importance of Family Connection has to do with improving the lives of children and families throughout the state of Georgia. And when we look at the state of Georgia, ranked 49th overall in the U.S. in providing services for children and families, there's a very, very large need to improve that situation.
The Department of Human Resources and several members of the legislature also joined the governor in supporting this initiative.
We are administratively attached through the budget process to the Department of Human Resources. So much of our work crosses over with the Department of Family and Children Services and Public Health and Mental Health. We count on them to be partners. We hope that we create a community table and bring other stakeholders to the decision-making process that assists them in meeting their goals as well.
One of the governor's main focuses since taking office has been children and education, and recognizes that a child's success can grow with a strong family connection. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelsky.
Women members of the United Auto Workers met at the Capitol today to lobby legislators for equal pay for women in the workplace. The group handed out payday candy bars to legislators to remind them of National Pay Equity Day on April the 16th. Representative Nan Auroch and Senator Donzella James spoke to the UAW today and expressed their support for the organization.
Today, Equity Day at the state capitol, women from labor around the state have come to bring a message to the legislature and to the governor that we need to work for pay equity. Right now in the United States, a woman's wages are just 73 cents on the dollar that every man earns. If you're an African American woman, it's even less. It's less than 65%. Hispanic women also suffer from the lack of pay equity. We are here with a message that this needs to be addressed, and it's a highlighted issue for working families.
Please pass the equal pay for women, because we really need to help for single parents to help with their families. You know, it's just really hard, so I really would like to see that pass.
The UAW also asked lawmakers to vote against House Bill 1318, a bill that would allow employers to assign doctor appointment times to workers.
Members of the Police Chiefs Association gathered this morning at the Capitol to hear a House resolution declaring today Police Chief Recognition Day in Georgia. Representative Mike Snow presented the resolution and pledged to continue working on funds for law enforcement agencies.
We have some problems with the budget down here, but we're going to continue trying to fund every part of the agency down in Forsyth that trains your officers, and we're going to try to put some more money back in the budget.
Representative Jeanette Jamison was also on hand to present Toccoa Police Chief Frank Strickland with a resolution honoring him as Georgia's 2001 Outstanding Chief of the Year. She says that law enforcement officials need public and legislative support, particularly now.
The additional responsibilities that have been added to their jobs since September the 11th, of course, have far too often been added without any additional funds. And this has made their responsibility not only awesome but overwhelming. And they meet these needs with professional character, with the kind of expertise that only local law enforcement, trained local law enforcement, can bring.
A similar resolution was passed in the Senate.
Also today, lawmakers receive a September 11th medallion made from steel girders that once supported the World Trade Center. The medallions were made by International Agile Manufacturing in Statesboro, Georgia.
When we read articles about steel going overseas and becoming something that we thought was inappropriate and probably would be shipped back to the greatest market in the world, these United States, we at IAM knew we had to do something. We could not put it in our regular products, our rotors, our brake drums. We had to do something special. But the creativity of the Georgian Statesboro people, we, and I say we, not I, created the medallion. Each one of you, we thank you for receiving it. And if you need any more, make sure you contact us.
And here are some stories that we are working on for tomorrow's Lawmakers program. It is Human Relations Day at the Capitol. We're going to have all the festivities. And Governor Roy Barnes is expected to announce a partnership with the United States Coast Guard, so please join us tomorrow night for that. A viewing tip for you tonight. At 9 o'clock, Egypt's Golden Empire is going to be here on GPTV. Don't miss it. And that's our broadcast. I'm Susan Hoffman.
I'm Gerald Bryant. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Tonight.